Hey guys, tonight we strip away the polished veneer of high society to reveal the grimy, terrified survival instincts hidden beneath our most common pleasantries. We're going to look at why you actually shake hands, why you really clink glasses, and why being polite was originally just a desperate attempt to stay alive in a world that wanted you dead. Imagine a candlelit tavern that smells of wet dog and fermented grain, where a simple misunderstanding about seating arrangements could end with a flail to the chest. It's a world where manners aren't about which fork to use for the salad, but about proving you aren't an assassin. Honestly, with your current habit of scrolling your phone at the dinner table, you probably won't survive this timeline. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment letting me know where you are in the world and what time it is. I love seeing the global map of insomniacs we're building here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing ankle deep in the churned up muck of a medieval thoroughfare. It's not the romanticized cobblestone you see in fantasy movies. It's a slurry of mud, animal waste, and the refuse of 1,000 frantic lives. The air hangs heavy and damp, smelling of wood smoke and unwashed wool. You pull your cloak tighter, not just against the biting wind, but to create a barrier between you and the chaotic humanity pressing in on all sides. In this world, roughly 600 years ago, silence is rare, and safety is a luxury you cannot afford. You feel the weight of this atmosphere pressing down on your shoulders, a constant, low-level hum of anxiety that never really goes away. To understand where our modern book of etiquette comes from, you have to first understand the absolute paranoia of the environment you've just stepped into. Today, if you bump into someone at the grocery store, you mumble a quick apology and move on. Here, a collision is an act of aggression. Personal space isn't a preference, it's a defensive perimeter. The social rules governing this world were not drafted by fussy aristocrats sipping tea. They were forged in the fires of necessity by people trying to survive a society that functioned a lot like a prison yard with no guards. Think of medieval etiquette less like a guide to being nice and more like a bundle of non-aggression treaties you sign with your body every time you enter a room. You are walking through a society where the central government is distant, the police force is non-existent, and almost every adult male you pass is carrying a weapon. It might be a sword if they're wealthy, but more likely it's a long knife, a heavy cudgel, or a tool that can easily double as a skull crusher. Violence isn't a shocking news story here. It's a mundane method of conflict resolution. It's the background radiation of your life. In this context, being polite is actually a rigorous system of signaling. It's like the blinking lights on a modern aircraft, constantly broadcasting, "I see you. I respect your threat level. I am not currently trying to kill you." Every bow, every nod, and every uncovered head is a code. If you get the code wrong, the consequences aren't social awkwardness, they are physical trauma. It's a bit like navigating a modern roundabout, but if you fail to yield, the other driver is legally allowed to challenge you to a duel. You trudge forward, the heavy, scratchy wool of your tunic rubbing against your neck. You're heading toward a local hall for a meal. As you approach the heavy oak door, you hesitate. Entering a building is a tactical transition. You are moving from the open danger of the street to the confined danger of an enclosed space. This is where the civilizing process begins. That's a term coined by the sociologist Norbert Elias, and historians still argue whether this process actually made humans less violent, or if it just pushed the violence behind closed doors and wrapped it in fancy ribbons. Some scholars think manners domesticated us like wolves into dogs. Others think we're just wolves wearing napkins. Regardless of the academic debate, the reality for you standing at that threshold is visceral. You need to verify that the people inside aren't enemies, and they need to verify the same about you. This mutual suspicion is the soil from which the flower of politeness grows. When you see depictions of knights and ladies being exceedingly courteous, treating each other with exaggerated respect, you might think it looks exhausting. And it is. But it's exhausting in the way that defusing a bomb is exhausting. You do it carefully because the alternative is messy. Consider the very concept of a stranger. In the modern world, a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet, or at least someone impartial. In the medieval mindset, a stranger is a threat until proven otherwise. There is no benefit of the doubt. This is why hospitality laws were so sacred and so rigid. Once you invite someone in, you are bound by a spiritual contract to protect them, and they are bound not to murder you in your sleep. It's a tense exchange. When you greet someone, you aren't just saying hello, you are actively scanning them. You're looking at their hands, their posture, their eyes. Are they tense? Are they reaching for something? The manners you use are designed to make you look harmless. You make yourself smaller. You lower your voice. You keep your hands visible. It's the human equivalent of a dog rolling over to expose its belly. It says, "Look, no armor here. No hidden dagger. Please don't hurt me." Over centuries, these desperate survival signals will lose their life or death urgency. They will soften, become rote, and eventually transform into the mindless pleasantries we use today. But make no mistake, underneath that polite, "How do you do?" is a primal scream that translates roughly to, "I acknowledge your power. Please allow me to continue existing." As you push open the door to the hall, the warmth hits you, a mix of roasting meat and accumulated body heat. The noise level is chaotic. It's a sensory assault. You step inside, and for a split second, heads turn. The room assesses you. You freeze. This is the critical moment. You are an unknown variable in a closed ecosystem. What you do with your hands, your eyes, and your body in the next 10 seconds will determine if you get a seat at the bench or get thrown back out into the mud. You instinctively realize that every movement needs to be deliberate. Fast movements are for combat. Slow movements are for peace. You unspool your scarf slowly. You keep your hands away from your belt. You smile, not because you're happy. Let's be real. Life here is mostly manual labor and dying of tooth infections, but because a smile distorts the face in a way that is physiologically difficult to maintain while attacking someone. It is a biological white flag. This is the great irony of etiquette. We tend to think of the Middle Ages as a time of barbarism that was eventually cured by politeness. But the truth is, the politeness was a symptom of the barbarism. You only need explicit rules about not stabbing your dinner guests when stabbing your dinner guests is a statistically significant risk. You only need a rule about not throwing bones at the servants when historically people kept hitting the servants with bones. So as we settle into this narrative, keep your guard up. We are going to deconstruct the specific mechanics of these interactions. We'll look at your hands, your drink, and your sneeze. But for now, just stand there in the doorway, letting the heat of the fire warm your freezing hands, and appreciate the fact that when someone holds a door open for you in the 21st century, they probably aren't checking your waistline for a concealed broadsword. Probably, you are standing there in the hall, the heat of the fire flushing your cheeks, and a figure detaches itself from the shadows. A man approaches you. He is broad, smelling of damp leather and old ale, and as he closes the distance, your eyes instinctively drop to his waist, then to his hands. This is a reflex you haven't had to cultivate in the 21st century, where the most dangerous thing a stranger usually pulls out is a business card with a questionable font choice. But here, the approach of a stranger is a biological alarm bell. Your heart rate ticks up, a rhythmic thumping against your ribs that mirrors the tension in the room. He extends his right arm. You extend yours. The hands meet. Now pause that image. In your modern life, the handshake is a formality. It's a corporate ritual used to seal a deal, greet a father-in-law, or awkwardly end a first date. It's often limp, sometimes sweaty, and generally meaningless. But in this moment, in the dim light of a medieval tavern, this gesture is a high-stakes tactical maneuver. You aren't greeting him, you are neutralizing him. The origin of the handshake is the weapon check, pure and simple. It is the physical manifestation of the phrase, "I am currently unable to stab you." When this man reaches out, he is offering you his weapon hand. By clasping his right hand with your right hand, you are mutually agreeing to lock away your primary means of inflicting violence. It's a temporary ceasefire, codified in flesh and bone. You squeeze hard, not to convey character or firmness, but to feel the resistance of his muscles, to ensure he isn't holding a small blade palmed against his wrist. Let's talk about the shake part of the handshake. Today, pumping someone's hand up and down is just a way to add enthusiasm, like using an exclamation point in an email. But historically, that vertical motion had a very practical purpose. It was a gravity check. In the Middle Ages, and even going back to Roman times, men often carried daggers hidden up their sleeves. It was the medieval equivalent of a concealed carry permit, but with zero paperwork and much looser regulations. The sleeve was a perfect hiding spot, accessible, discreet, and deadly. So when you grip this stranger's hand, you don't just hold it, you shake it, you pump it vigorously. You are physically trying to dislodge anything hidden in the fabric of his tunic. If he has a dagger tucked against his forearm, the centrifugal force of a good, solid shake might just send it clattering to the floorboards. Imagine the awkward silence that would follow that sound. Clang. Oh, that? That's just my potato peeler for emergencies. This is why the grip is so important. In the modern world, we judge people for a dead fish handshake because it feels non-committal. In the ancient world, a loose grip was terrifying. It meant the other person wasn't fully engaging. They were holding back, potentially keeping their hand mobile enough to slip free and draw a weapon. A firm grip was the only way to ensure safety. You are essentially handcuffing the other person with your own fingers. And notice that it's always the right hand. This bias runs deep in human history, largely because roughly 90% of the population is right-handed. Therefore, the right hand is the sword hand or the weapon hand. The left hand, by contrast, has a terrible reputation. The word sinister actually comes from the Latin word for left. The left hand was often used for hygiene, wiping yourself in an era before 2-ply toilet paper, So offering a left hand was not just a tactical threat because your sword hand was still free, but a biological insult. It was saying, I will not neutralize my weapon, and also, here is the hand I use for dirty work. Historians still argue about exactly when the handshake shifted from a forearm clasp to a palm to palm grip. If you look at ancient Greek funerary art from the 5th century BC, you see carvings of soldiers shaking hands. But look closely, they often grip the wrist or the forearm. This is a much more secure hold. If you grab someone by the wrist, you control the limb. If you grab them by the hand, they have more wiggle room. Some scholars suggest the shift to the palm grip happened as society became slightly less murderous, or perhaps as long sleeves became less fashionable in certain eras, making the sleeve check less necessary. But the core DNA of the gesture remains. It is a mutual disarmament treaty. Let's go back to you and the stranger. You are pumping his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, evidence of labor, or perhaps sword drills. You are staring into his eyes. This too is part of the weapon check. You are looking for micro expressions, tiny flickers of intent. Is he looking at your purse? Is he glancing at his friends in the corner? The handshake buys you 3 to 5 seconds of intimate proximity to gather intelligence. It's fascinating to think about how this survival tactic has evolved into a measure of personality. We now say he has a trustworthy handshake. What we really mean, genetically speaking, is he effectively demonstrated he wasn't armed. The relief you feel when a handshake goes well is an echo of your ancestors breathing a sigh of relief that they didn't get gutted in a roadside encounter. There's also a quirky, lesser-known variation of this, the Roman salute, or the open-palmed wave. Before it was co-opted by terrible regimes in the 20th century, raising an open hand was the long-distance version of the handshake. If you were too far away to grab someone's wrist, you held your hand up, palm out, fingers spread. You were literally displaying your empty inventory. Look, nothing here. No rocks, no knives, no spears. It's the universal gesture of I surrender, or I come in peace. Even today, when a police officer tells you to show me your hands, they are invoking this ancient protocol. They need to see that you aren't holding the tools of death. As you release the stranger's hand, the tension dissipates slightly. The ritual is complete. You have verified his emptiness. He has verified yours. You are now technically acquaintances. You haven't exchanged names yet, and honestly, names are secondary. You've exchanged safety ratings. The adrenaline in your system starts to recede, leaving you with that slightly shaky feeling you get after a near miss in traffic. You move further into the room, navigating around a heavy wooden table. The air is thick with the smell of roasted fowl and unwashed humanity. You've passed the first test. You've successfully entered the space without being attacked. But now, a new challenge awaits. The simple act of acknowledging authority. In a world where status is determined by how many men you can command to kill for you, showing respect isn't just polite. It's a way to protect your neck, literally. You see a high-ranking lord sitting at the dais at the far end of the hall. He is looking at you. You know you need to acknowledge him, but a wave won't cut it. A handshake is too intimate for his station. You need a gesture that says, I am so non-threatening that I am willing to expose my most vulnerable anatomy to you. You prepare to bow, and as you do, remember, you aren't just being nice. You are offering him a clear shot at your spinal cord. You are still standing in the center of the hall, the heat of the fire radiating against your side, but a different kind of chill runs down your spine. The handshake with the stranger was a negotiation of equals, a lateral peace treaty. But now you are facing a vertical hierarchy. The man at the high table, the one with the fur-lined cloak and the heavy gold chain, holds the power of high and low's justice. In this era, that's just a fancy legal way of saying he can decide if you live or die without filling out much paperwork. To survive this encounter, you need to perform a gesture that is so biologically counterintuitive it borders on suicidal. You have to bow. In your modern life, a bow is something you see at the end of a theater performance, or maybe in a martial arts dojo. It looks graceful, artistic, even a bit theatrical. But strip away the velvet curtains and the black belts, and look at the anatomy of what you are actually doing. When you bow, you are lowering your eyes, effectively blinding yourself to the actions of the person in front of you. You are voluntarily giving up your visual radar. If the Lord decides to throw his goblet at you, or worse, signal a guard to strike, you won't see it coming until it's too late. But more importantly, you are exposing the nape of your neck. Reach up and touch the back of your neck for a second. It's warm, soft, and terrifyingly vulnerable. There is no rib cage here to protect the vitals. It's just a thin layer of skin and muscle covering the cervical vertebrae, the main highway of your nervous system, and the carotid arteries. It is the biological off switch for the human body. In the brutal calculus of medieval combat, the neck is the jackpot. A strike here is almost always fatal, instantly incapacitating, and difficult to fix. By presenting this specific patch of skin to the Lord, you are making a somatic declaration. I trust you so implicitly that I am placing my kill switch within your reach. It is the ultimate trust fall, but instead of falling backward into the arms of your coworkers at a team-building retreat, you are leaning forward into the potential path of an executioner's blade. This isn't just a human thing, by the way. If you've ever watched a nature documentary or just observed two dogs at a park, you've seen the origin of this. When a wolf loses a fight or submits to the pack alpha, it doesn't just run away. It often rolls over or lowers its head, baring its throat. It's an instinctual override that says, I am done fighting, you have won. See, I am defenseless. The victor usually stops attacking because the point has been made. Our polite bow is just the domesticated, upright version of that wolf exposing its jugular. We've just added nicer clothes and removed the biting. As you bend at the waist, feeling the heavy fabric of your tunic bunch up, you are enacting a ritual of diminishment. You are physically making yourself smaller. In a world where size and height equal dominance, lowering your height is a way of saying, I am not a challenger. The deeper the bow, the more height you lose, and the more neck you expose. This is why, historically, the depth of the bow was strictly regulated. A slight nod was for equals, a waist-deep bow was for royalty. And prostration, lying flat on the floor, was for gods or emperors. Prostration is the final form of this logic. You are effectively playing dead so they don't have to make you dead. Even today, we retain a micro version of this, the nod. Have you ever noticed the difference between the upward nod and the downward nod? When you see a friend or someone you consider an equal, you tend to jerk your chin up. It's a slight exposure of the throat, but it's defiant, casual. It says, I see you, and I'm comfortable enough to lift my chin. But when you greet a boss, a police officer, or your grandmother, you almost instinctively nod down. You tuck your chin, you protect the throat while exposing the crown of the head. It's a sub-second reenactment of the feudal bow, programmed into your muscle memory. There is a fascinating, slightly gruesome fringe fact about this exposure. In certain medieval and early modern execution traditions, the distinction between being beheaded and being hanged was a matter of class. Nobility were beheaded, commoners were hanged. Beheading was considered honorable. Why? Some historians suggest it's because the nobleman is granted the final dignity of the bow. He kneels, he lowers his head voluntarily, he exposes the neck. He retains agency in his final moment, submitting to the sword as he submitted to his king. The commoner, swinging from a rope, is denied this posture of willing submission. So, in a dark, twisted way, the bow you are performing now is a practice run for the most honorable way to die. Scholars and anthropologists still argue about whether this behavior is purely cultural or hardwired into our DNA. Is the bow something we learned because kings demanded it, or did kings demand it because we were already doing it? There's a school of thought that suggests the startle reflex, where we hunch our shoulders and duck our head to protect the neck, is the opposite of the bow. The bow is the anti-startle. It is the conscious suppression of the survival instinct. You are forcing your body to do the opposite of what it wants to do when facing a predator. It's mind over biology. You hold the bow for a count of 2. 1, 2. The silence in the hall seems to stretch. You are staring at the dirty rush matting on the floor, counting the stems of dried herbs scattered there to mask the smell of the dogs. You wait for the verbal cue, the permission to rise. This is the moment of vulnerability. If he wanted to, he could signal his guards now. You wouldn't see the signal. You'd just hear the rustle of chainmail and then darkness. Welcome, a voice booms. The tension snaps. You straighten up, your vertebrae stacking back into a defensible column. You have been acknowledged. You have been granted the right to continue existing in this space. The Lord waves a hand, a dismissive, lazy gesture, indicating you should find a place to sit. You breathe out, realizing you had been holding your breath the entire time. But the danger isn't over. Now you have to navigate the seating chart. In the modern world, finding a seat is about getting a good view of the TV or being near the buffet. Here, it's a tactical decision that rivals military positioning. You scan the benches. You see the long, heavy tables arranged in a U shape. You see the dark corners where the torchlight doesn't quite reach. You see the rowdy group of mercenaries halfway down the left side. You need to sit, but you can't just plop down anywhere. You need a spot that balances social rank with physical survival. You need to protect your back. You remember the old adage about watching your six? That wasn't invented by fighter pilots. It was invented by people trying to eat pottage without getting shanked. As you move toward the benches, you are looking for a wall. A wall is a friend. A wall is a shield that never gets tired. If you can get your back against a wall, you cut the number of directions you can be attacked from by half. You spot a gap on a bench near the hearth. It's crowded. You'll be shoulder to shoulder with strangers. It's not ideal, but it's better than the open stool in the center of the room, leaving you exposed on all sides like a statue in a park. You move toward it, stepping carefully over a sleeping hound that looks like a rugged rug with teeth. You are about to enter the zone of table etiquette, which sounds polite, but is actually just crowd control for armed, drunk people. You slide onto the rough wooden bench, wincing slightly as a splinter catches the fabric of your hose. The space is tight. You are wedged between a burly merchant who smells faintly of salted fish and a thin, nervous-looking cleric who is muttering to himself. The table in front of you is a thick slab of oak, scarred by decades of knife marks, spilled wine, and probably the occasional forehead slamming into it. This isn't a dining experience. It's a defensive formation. Welcome to the paranoia of the Great Hall. In modern society, we obsess over the head of the table. We think of it as a place of honor, where the father sits at Thanksgiving or the boss sits during a board meeting. But the origin of this seating arrangement is purely tactical. The high table in a medieval hall is almost always positioned on a dais, a raised platform. This gives the lord a height advantage. In a skirmish, height is everything. It's much harder to charge up a set of steps to attack someone than it is to rush them on level ground. Furthermore, the high table is usually positioned against a solid stone wall, far away from the main doors. Why? Because the door is the fatal funnel. It's the entry point for assassins, invading armies, or just an angry mob of peasants demanding lower grain taxes. By sitting as far away from the door as possible, with a wall at his back and a room full of loyal retainers between him and the exit, the Lord has bought himself time. If the doors burst open, he has a solid 30 seconds to grab his sword, flip the table for cover, or escape through a hidden bolt hole behind the tapestry. But you aren't the Lord. You are down in the pit, the main floor area. Your survival depends on your own situational awareness. You glance around. You instinctively checked for a wall to put your back against, but alas, the wall seats were taken by the early birds, veterans who know the score. You are exposed from behind. This triggers a primal itch between your shoulder blades. In the absence of a wall, you have to rely on the buddy system, although in this era, buddies are just people who haven't decided to kill you yet. This fear of the unguarded back is deeply ingrained in our architectural psyche. Even today, look at where people choose to sit in a restaurant. The booths along the wall always fill up first. The tables in the dead center of the room, the ones floating in the sea of foot traffic, are the last to be taken. We call them bad tables. Why? Because subconsciously, they feel unsafe. We can't see what's happening behind us. We feel monitored or surrounded. It's a low-grade version of the same anxiety you're feeling right now on this medieval bench. Now consider the lighting. It's dim here. Candles and torches are expensive, so the corners of the hall are swallowed by shadows. In a modern home, dark corners are just cozy or maybe hard to clean. Here, a dark corner is a tactical blind spot. You find yourself constantly scanning the periphery. Is that a serving girl bringing more ale, or someone creeping up with a garrote? You shift in your seat, trying to keep your peripheral vision clear. This is why medieval guests often sat on only one side of the table, the side facing the room, leaving the other side empty for service. It wasn't just to make it easier for the servers. It was so no one could sneak up behind the diners under the guise of refilling a goblet. There's a fascinating historical debate about the salt cellar. You might have heard that being above the salt or below the salt was a major status marker. A massive, ornate salt cellar would be placed in the middle of the high table. If you sat above it, closer to the Lord, you were VIP. If you sat below it, you were common rabble. But some military historians suggest the salt cellar wasn't just a boundary marker, it was a line of sight. The Lord needed a clear view of his guests. Large centerpieces, common in modern weddings, would have been banned here. You don't put a massive vase of flowers in front of you if it blocks your view of the guy who might throw a knife at you. The open table layout was about surveillance as much as it was about status. You feel a jostle from the merchant on your left. He's reaching for a loaf of bread. You flinch. Your hand drifts toward your belt knife, your eating knife, ostensibly, but let's be real. It's sharp enough to do damage. This is the constant tension of the meal. You are eating with armed strangers. Every sudden movement is a potential threat. This brings us to the toast. In a moment, someone is going to call for a toast. In your time, a toast is a moment of celebration. You raise a glass, say cheers, and sip. It's nice. Here, it's a security protocol. When the host stands to make a toast, everyone stands. Why? Because it's harder to draw a weapon or launch a surprise attack when you are already standing and everyone is looking at you. The toast forces the room to synchronize. It demands attention. It halts all side conversations and secret plotting. For a brief moment, everyone is doing the same thing, visible to everyone else. It is a reset button for the room's aggression levels. And speaking of drinking, have you noticed the mugs? They are heavy, pewter, wood, or fired clay. Some of them have glass bottoms. There's a persistent legend, which falls into the maybe true, maybe myth category, that the glass bottom tankard was invented so you could see the room while you were drinking. If you tilt a solid mug up to your face, you go blind for the 3 seconds it takes to chug your ale. In a bar fight, 3 seconds is an eternity. A glass bottom lets you keep an eye on your adversary even while you hydrate. It's the medieval equivalent of checking your rearview mirror. As you sit there, trying to look relaxed while mentally calculating the trajectory of every sharp object in the room, a servant slams a pitcher of wine onto the table. The merchant grabs it. He pours a cup for himself, then pauses. He looks at you. He pours a bit of wine from his cup into yours, then tops his own off again. Wait, what was that? Was that generosity? No, that was the host's sample. In an era where poison was the silent killer, the coward's weapon, sharing a drink was the only proof of safety. But it goes deeper than just pouring. The way we interact with glasses, the clink, the cheers, is about to happen. And it's not about celebrating the vintage. It's about ensuring that if one of us goes down, we all go down. You watch the red liquid swirl in your cup. It looks uncomfortably like blood in the flickering torchlight. You look at the merchant. He raises his goblet. You raise yours. You are about to engage in a ritual that has survived for millennia, but you are going to do it the old way, the violent way. You aren't just going to tap the rims gently like polite dinner guests. You are going to smash them together. You tighten your grip on the heavy goblet. It's rough pottery, cool to the touch, and slick with the condensation of the room's humidity. The merchant beside you grins, revealing a set of teeth that have clearly seen better decades. He swings his cup toward yours with the enthusiasm of a man trying to hammer a nail. You brace yourself. This isn't the gentle, melodic ding of crystal flutes at a wedding reception. This is a collision of heavy earthenware. Thunk. Liquid sloshes over the rim of his cup and splashes directly into yours. A few drops of your vintage fly into his. It's messy. It's aggressive. It stains the already filthy tablecloth, and it is the single most reassuring thing that has happened to you all night. Welcome to the origins of the cheers. In the modern world, clinking glasses is a symbolic gesture of unity. It's an acoustic exclamation point on a celebration. But in the paranoid landscape of the Middle Ages, it was a biological insurance policy. Poison was the medieval equivalent of a drone strike, silent, effective, and capable of taking out a target without the attacker ever needing to draw a sword. It was the coward's weapon, and because it was cowardly, it was terrifyingly common. You didn't need muscle or skill to use arsenic or hemlock. You just needed access to the kitchen. The logic of the violent clink is simple: fluid dynamics. If you hit two full cups together hard enough, the liquids inevitably mix. By splashing his wine into your cup and yours into his, you are creating a shared cocktail of potential death. If he has poisoned your drink, he has now effectively poisoned his own. It's a sophisticated game of mutually assured destruction, played out with fermented grapes. If he drinks heartily after the clink, you can be reasonably sure that you aren't going to die foaming at the mouth before the main course arrives. This is why the phrase, "to your health," appears in almost every language. Salud, santé, prost, kampai. Today, it's a pleasant wish for general well-being, like telling someone to have a nice day. Originally, it was a literal urgent prayer. You were saying, "I sincerely hope that the liquid we are about to ingest does not cause our internal organs to shut down." You were drinking to the immediate, short-term survival of the dinner party. Now historians, being the joy killers they are, love to argue about this. Some scholars claim that the splashing theory is a bit of a myth, or at least exaggerated. They argue that you'd have to smash the cups absurdly hard to get a significant mixture, and that people probably weren't that eager to waste good wine. They propose an alternative theory, the sensorium theory. They suggest that wine was meant to please all five senses. You could see the color, smell the bouquet, taste the flavor, and feel the cup. But what about the ears? The clink was added to bring the sense of hearing to the party, completing the sensory experience. It's a nice, poetic thought. But given that these same people thought lobotomies were a cure for headaches, I'm leaning toward the fear of death theory. Speaking of paranoia, let's talk about the royal taster. If you think your internship was bad, imagine being the guy whose job description is literally human canary. Kings and high lords were so terrified of poisoning that they employed people solely to eat their food first. This wasn't a culinary critique, it was a bioassay. The taster would eat, and then everyone would sit around awkwardly for an hour to see if he turned green or fell over. If the taster was still standing, the king could eat. It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase, waiting for a table. But the paranoia didn't stop at human testers. It extended into the realm of magic and luxury goods. This brings us to one of the most fascinating fringe beliefs of the era, the unicorn horn. Wealthy nobles would pay a fortune, literally the price of a castle, for what they believed was the horn of a unicorn. In reality, it was usually the tusk of a narwhal sold by enterprising Viking traders who kept the source a secret. The belief was that unicorn horn, or alicorn, had magical properties that could neutralize poison. Some lords had entire cups made of this material. The legend said that if you poured poison into a unicorn horn cup, the cup would sweat, change color, or even explode. Imagine the tension of watching your dinner host pour wine into a bone-white goblet, everyone holding their breath, waiting for it to shatter. When it didn't, the relief was palpable. It was the placebo effect, weaponized for dining. Of course, when the noble eventually died of dysentery or lead poisoning anyway, Nobody blamed the cup. They just assumed it was a stronger demon. There is another element to your drink that explains a common modern phrase. You look into your cup and see a piece of spiced, toasted bread floating in the wine. It looks soggy and unappealing, like a crouton that gave up on life, but this is the origin of the toast. In the Middle Ages, wine was often, let's be charitable, and say rustic. It was acidic, sometimes bitter, and full of sediment. To make it palatable, they would drop a piece of spiced, toasted bread into the pitcher or the cup. The charcoal on the toast would absorb some of the bad flavors and the acidity, basically an early carbon filter, and the spices would mask the taste of the vinegar. When the cup was passed around, the last person to drink would get the toast. It was the prize, a boozy, wine-soaked snack at the bottom. So when we make a toast today, we are verbally referencing that soggy piece of bread. We've kept the word but lost the floating carb, probably for the best. I don't think dropping a slice of Wonder Bread into your champagne would have the same classy vibe at a New Year's Eve party. You lift the heavy goblet to your lips. The merchant is watching you. You take a sip. It's sour, strong, and tastes faintly of wood smoke. But the merchant is drinking too, gulping it down with gusto. You relax. The ritual has worked. The fluid pact is sealed. You aren't going to die of poison tonight. But as you set the heavy mug down, a new problem arises. The hall is filling up. More people are squeezing onto the bench. You are now packed in so tightly that you can feel the body heat of the cleric on your right and the merchant on your left. You are trapped in a wall of wool and leather. You try to lift your arm to wipe your mouth, and your elbow bumps the merchant's ribs. He grunts and shoots you a look. You freeze. You have just violated the next great survival rule of the medieval table. In a world where everyone is armed and personal space is non-existent, the position of your elbows isn't about posture. It's about preventing a brawl. You realize that to finish this meal without starting a war, you are going to have to make yourself very, very narrow. You are about to learn why elbows off the table was the first rule of keeping the peace. You are now effectively immobilized. The bench is packed so tightly that your hips are locked against your neighbors and your thighs are pressed against the rough edge of the table. You feel like a piece of luggage jammed into the overhead bin of a budget airline, except the passenger next to you is wearing chainmail and hasn't bathed since the last solstice. The concept of personal space hasn't been invented yet. In fact, it won't be invented until suburbanites decide they need 3 feet of lawn between them and the nearest human to feel safe. Here, intimacy isn't a choice, it's a logistical nightmare. You try to adjust your position, shifting your weight to relieve the numbness in your left leg. Immediately, your elbow flares out. It bumps the merchant's upper arm, just as he is lifting a piece of dripping meat to his mouth. He freezes. The grease wobbles dangerously on his lip. He slowly turns his head to look at you. It's not a friendly look. It's the look of a man who is calculating whether it's worth the effort to throttle you. You pull your arms in instantly, tucking your elbows tight against your ribs. You have just discovered the visceral origin of the rule. Keep your elbows off the table. Growing up, your grandmother probably told you that elbows on the table were uncouth or lazy. She made it sound like a failure of character. But in the medieval Great Hall, keeping your elbows off the table and tucked into your sides was a safety protocol. It was the only way to prevent a domino effect of chaos. Imagine 20 large men sitting on a single, wobbly wooden bench. If one person splays their elbows out, the medieval equivalent of manspreading, they encroach on the territory of the person next to them. In a modern cafeteria, this is annoying. In a hall where every man has a dagger on his belt and a belly full of strong ale, it's a provocation. Think of your body as a distinct geopolitical zone. Your torso is your capital city. Your arms are your borders. If you expand your borders by putting your elbows on the table, you are invading the sovereign territory of the merchant. Retaliation is expected. This is why medieval dining posture is so rigid. You aren't sitting up straight to look elegant. You are sitting up straight to minimize your footprint. You are trying to be a vertical line in a horizontal world. This spatial tension is made infinitely worse by the trencher. Look down at the table. There are no ceramic plates. Instead, there are large, flat rounds of stale, 4-day-old bread called trenchers. They act as edible plates, soaking up the gravy and juices. But here's the kicker. You don't get your own. In a move that would make a modern germaphobe scream into a pillow, you are likely sharing a trencher with your neighbor. This is where the term messmate comes from. You are literally sharing the mess. You and the merchant are eating from the same pile of food, dipping into the same sauce, and tearing from the same loaf. This forced intimacy requires a level of choreography that rivals a ballet. If you reach in while he is reaching in, your hands collide. If you bump his arm while he's cutting, the knife slips. And let's be clear about the knife. There are no forks here. The fork is currently a controversial piece of technology, mostly used in Italy and Byzantium. In Northern Europe, the church is actually suspicious of forks, viewing them as artificial hands that insult God's design. God gave you fingers, the priests say. Why do you need a golden claw? So you are eating with your fingers and your personal knife. This makes the elbows in rule a matter of life and death. If you bump someone's arm while they are holding a razor-sharp blade near their face or yours, someone is getting cut. A slip of the knife could sever a tendon or slice a cheek. In a world without antibiotics, a deep cut from a grease-covered knife is essentially a slow-motion death sentence. Gangrene doesn't care if it was an accident, so you learn to eat like a T-Rex, arms glued to your sides, forearms moving only from the elbow down, precise, jerky movements. It looks ridiculous to modern eyes, like you're trying to defuse a bomb with your teeth, but it keeps the peace. There is a fascinating scholarly debate regarding the civilizing of the elbow. Some historians argue that the elbows off rule actually got stricter as tables got less crowded in later centuries. They suggest that as people started getting individual chairs and plates, the Renaissance era, the rules of etiquette shifted from don't stab your neighbor to don't look like you are guarding your food. In the medieval period, hunched over your food with elbows out was a sign of animalistic aggression, like a dog growling over a bone. It signaled, "This is mine, stay away." By forcing people to lift their elbows and sit back, society was forcing them to perform a lack of aggression. See, I'm not guarding my food. I am relaxed. I am civilized. But right now, in the crush of the hall, you aren't worried about looking civilized. You are worried about the physics of the bench. You notice that the bench itself is a hazard. It's not fixed to the floor. If the people on one end stand up suddenly to cheer or fight, the bench acts like a seesaw. The other end, where you are, could tip up, dumping everyone onto the rush-covered floor. This actually happened. Chronicles from the time describe banquets descending into chaos because of bench failure. So you keep your weight centered, your elbows in, and your feet planted. You are a stabilizer. You watch the cleric on your right. He's nervous. He keeps tucking his hands into his sleeves when he's not eating. He's practicing containment. He knows that in a crowded room, a loose hand is a liability. If he gestures wildly while telling a story, he might knock over a pitcher. Spilling the wine is a major offense. Wine is expensive. It's also the blood of Christ, symbolically. Wasting it is both an economic and spiritual fail. If you spill on the Lord's expensive tapestry, you might be working it off in the stables for the next 3 years, so the table becomes a zone of extreme physical discipline. You realize that good manners are essentially a form of traffic control. You yield the right of way to the person with the bigger knife. You signal your turns. You stay in your lane. The silence of the meal, or at least the lack of boisterous physical comedy, is enforced by the density of the crowd. Even the way you chew is dictated by this closeness. You can't chew with your mouth open because you are 12 inches away from someone else's face. No one wants to see the masticated pulp of your pork roast. It's visceral revulsion. Today, we say it's gross. Then it was a trigger for violence. People were on edge. Life was hard, cold, and painful. If you sat there smacking your lips and spraying crumbs on a man who just lost half his livestock to a plague, he might just decide that you are the problem he can actually solve today. As you navigate this minefield, managing your elbows, your knees, and your shared bread plate, you realize you need to cut a piece of meat. The servant has dropped a large joint of roasted mutton onto the table. You reach for your knife. You pull it from the sheath at your belt. It's a utilitarian tool, stained with carbon steel gray. But here is the danger. You are now holding a weapon at a dinner party. How you hold it, how you point it, and what you do with it when you aren't cutting is the next great hurdle. You can't just wave it around to emphasize a point. You can't point it at someone to ask for the salt. You are about to learn that pointing with a knife is the verbal equivalent of shouting a death threat. You grip the handle, feeling the weight of the steel, and look for a safe angle of attack, not on the merchant, but on the mutton. You are sitting there, your heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against your ribs, clutching the handle of your knife. It's not a polished silverware piece from a wedding registry. It's a tool. The blade is carbon steel, dark and prone to rust, honed to a razor edge on a whetstone earlier that morning. In your modern life, a knife at the table is for spreading butter or cutting a soft lasagna. Here, this object is the same one you'd use to skin a rabbit, cut a rope, or if things go south, defend your life. You look at the slab of mutton on the trencher. You need to cut a piece, but the air around you is charged with a specific kind of high-voltage static. You are holding a lethal weapon inches from another man's jugular. This brings us to one of the most ingrained rules of table etiquette. Never point your knife at anyone. Growing up, you were told this was rude. It falls into the same category as chewing with your mouth open. But in the medieval context, pointing a knife isn't a social faux pas. It is a declaration of intent. It is the visual equivalent of racking a shotgun slide in a quiet room. When you gesture with a blade, extending your arm towards someone, their brain doesn't register, oh, he's emphasizing a point. Their reptilian brain screams, incoming. Think about the psychology of the point. When you point a finger, you are directing attention. When you point a sharp object, you are directing a threat vector. If you are telling a story to the merchant on your left and you wave your knife toward him to punctuate a joke, you are forcing him to flinch. You are triggering his startle reflex. He has to assess, in a microsecond, whether you are being funny or being homicidal. Doing this repeatedly is a great way to get punched in the throat. This is why the etiquette of the knife is so precise. When you aren't actively cutting meat, the knife is down, not just resting, grounded. You place it on the table, blade facing inward, away from your neighbor, or you wipe it and sheath it. Keeping a knife in your hand while you talk is considered a sign of instability. It implies you are ready for action, not conversation. And then there is the passing of the knife. Suppose the cleric on your right needs to borrow your blade because his is dull. You don't just hand it over. There is a rigid protocol here, one that survives in Boy Scout troops and climbing circles today. You hold the blade carefully and offer the handle. This is the ultimate trust exercise. You are holding the dangerous end, the part that cuts, and offering him the control end, the part that wields power. You are making yourself vulnerable to empower him. If you hand it blade first, you are effectively thrusting a weapon at him. He has to grab the sharp steel to take it from you. It's aggressive and stupid. By offering the handle, you are physically demonstrating, I am trusting you with this weapon. Now let's talk about the shape of the knife. Look at the tip of your blade. It's pointed, sharp. It's designed to pierce. This is standard for the Middle Ages because you eat with the same knife you fight with. But if you fast forward a few centuries, the table knife changes. It becomes rounded, blunt, almost useless for anything but spreading jam. Why? There is a famous historical anecdote, which historians love because it's so petty, about Cardinal Richelieu in 17th century France. The story goes that Richelieu, a man of immense power and refinement, was disgusted by his dinner guests using the sharp points of their daggers to pick their teeth at the table. It was gross, dangerous, and visually offensive. So he ordered all the table knives in his household to have their points ground down into rounded ends. King Louis XIV later took this a step further, banning pointed knives at the table entirely, ostensibly to reduce violence. If you can't stab your dinner guest, you have to argue with them instead. So the dull, rounded butter knife in your kitchen drawer is actually a relic of a government-mandated gun control policy, but for cutlery. It's a tool that has been neutered by the state to keep you from picking your teeth or stabbing your uncle. But back in the medieval hall, your knife is still very much a weapon, and because you are holding a weapon, your body language must be impeccable. This leads us to the rule about leaning. You are tired, the bench has no back support, your lower back is aching. You want to slouch, maybe lean on the table, or shift your weight onto the merchant's shoulder for a second. Don't do it. Don't lean on your neighbor isn't just about respecting personal space, it's about pinning. In hand-to-hand combat, controlling your opponent's movement is key. If you lean your shoulder heavily against the merchant, you are effectively pinning his arm. You are restricting his ability to draw his own knife or defend himself. In a high-trust society, leaning is affectionate. In a low-trust society, leaning is a prelude to a grapple. If you lean on him, his body interprets it as a dominance move. You are using your weight to off-balance him. His instinct will be to shove you back, hard, to regain his center of gravity and his freedom of movement. A shoving match on a crowded bench usually ends with someone falling backward, drinks spilling, and tempers flaring. And since everyone is holding a knife, well, you do the math. This extends to the table itself. Don't lean on the table is a rule you've heard 1,000 times. In the Middle Ages, this was partly because the trestle tables were unstable. If you put your full weight on the edge, you could flip the whole thing. But it was also about guarding. When you lean over your food, hunching your shoulders and encircling your plate with your arms, you look like a predator protecting a kill. It's antisocial. It signals that you are greedy, aggressive, and unwilling to share. To be polite is to sit back, exposing your chest, your vulnerable zone, showing that you aren't afraid someone is going to steal your mutton. There's a strange, grim little fact about the salt again here. Passing the salt was perilous. You couldn't just hand it to someone. Why? Because if you handed the heavy salt cellar to someone and they dropped it, it was bad luck. Spilled salt meant a fight or a demon. But also, in the handoff, your hands might touch, or you might fumble and knock a knife askew. The rule became, place the salt on the table within their reach, then remove your hand. They then pick it up. No direct transfer. It's like a drug deal in a spy movie. Put the package on the bench and walk away. As you carve your meat, you are careful to cut small pieces. This isn't just for digestion. It's because stuffing your cheeks like a chipmunk is dangerous. If you start choking, the Heimlich maneuver hasn't been invented yet. Dr. Heimlich won't show up until 1974. If you choke here, people might just think you're having a fit or being possessed. They might hit you on the back, or they might start praying, but your odds aren't great. Plus, a mouthful of food means you can't speak. If someone challenges you or asks a question, you are rendered mute. In a negotiation, and every meal is a negotiation, silence can be misinterpreted. You finish cutting your meat. You wipe the grease from your knife on a piece of bread, which you then eat because calories are scarce. You sheath the knife. The distinctive click of the blade sliding into leather is a sound of finality. You have disarmed. You are signaling to the group, I am done, else I am no longer a threat. The meal winds down. The tension in the room shifts from the sharp anxiety of hunger to the dull roar of digestion and intoxication. The merchant belches, a sound that, contrary to popular myth, wasn't necessarily a compliment to the chef, but just a biological fact of eating heavy, fatty food quickly. You survive the dinner. You didn't get poisoned, you didn't get stabbed, and you didn't accidentally challenge anyone to a duel by pointing your cutlery. But now, you have to leave. You have to step back out into the world. And if you think the table was chaotic, wait until you see the streets. The dinner was a controlled environment. The market? The market is the Wild West. You stand up, your legs stiff. You nod to your messmates, a final I acknowledge you neck-bearing gesture, and head for the door. Outside, the sun has set, but the business of the city grinds on. You need supplies for tomorrow. You need to buy bread. And to do that, you're going to have to navigate the most infuriating, violent, and surprisingly complex invention of public order, the queue. You step out of the heavy oak doors of the hall and into the cool, biting air of the late afternoon. You might expect the streets to be winding down, but the city is just hitting its second wind. You are heading toward the market square, the beating heart of the medieval city, and as you get closer, the sound hits you before the smell does. It's a low, chaotic roar, a mix of shouting traders, bleating livestock, the grinding of cartwheels, and the aggressive haggling of people who know the price of grain has gone up 3 farthings since Tuesday. Welcome to the medieval shopping experience. If you think Black Friday at an electronics store is a dystopian nightmare, you clearly haven't tried to buy a sack of flour during a bad harvest in the 14th century. You merge into the crowd. The concept of personal space we discussed earlier, it's completely gone here. You are now a particle in a fluid mass of humanity. You are being jostled from every angle. A basket of turnips digs into your ribs. A muddy dog weaves between your legs, nearly tripping you. And the smell is a potent cocktail of unwashed bodies, animal manure, and rotting cabbage. You need to buy bread. It sounds simple. In your time, you walk into a grocery store, grab a plastic wrapped loaf from a shelf stocked with 50 identical loaves, scan it, and leave. You barely have to make eye contact with a human being. Here, buying bread is a full contact sport. It is a tactical operation that requires patience, strength, and a keen understanding of mob psychology. You approach the baker's stall. There is a crowd, a disorganized, shouting, shoving mass of people. They are all hungry, they are all tired, and they are all terrified that the baker is going to run out of loaves before they get to the front. This is the birthplace of the queue. We tend to think of queuing, waiting in a nice, orderly line, as a uniquely British trait, or perhaps a product of modern bureaucracy. We imagine it's about fairness. First come, first served. It sounds so civilized. But the origin of the queue has nothing to do with fairness and everything to do with riot control. In the early medieval period, the scrum was the standard way to buy things. You pushed your way to the front. The biggest, strongest, and loudest got served first. If you were a small, quiet person, you starved, or you waited until the end and got the burnt crusts. But as populations grew and cities became denser, the scrum became dangerous. People were getting trampled. Fights were breaking out. If a baker had 50 loaves and 100 customers, the 51st customer might decide to just burn the stall down out of spite. So the queue was invented, or rather enforced, as a safety valve. It was a way to linearize the mob. By forcing people into a line, you reduce the surface area of the conflict. Instead of fighting everyone at once, you only have to deal with the person directly in front of you and the person directly behind you. It transforms a 360-degree threat environment into a manageable front and rear engagement. You find yourself instinctively looking for the end of the line. It's a jagged, snaking formation. You step in behind a woman carrying a crate of chickens. She glares at you, checking to see if you are going to try to cut in. Cutting the line here isn't a social faux pas. It's a theft of resources. If you cut in front of her, you aren't just making her wait longer. You are potentially stealing the food she needs to feed her children. If you try it, she and everyone behind her is morally and legally justified in physically removing you. And by removing, I mean beating you with that crate of chickens. This is where the market piece comes into play. Most medieval markets operated under special laws. The king or the local lord would declare the market a zone of king's peace. This meant that crimes committed within the market boundaries carried double or triple the usual penalties. Drawing a weapon in a dispute over a loaf of bread could get your hand cut off. This harsh legal framework was the only thing keeping the queue from dissolving into a brawl. The invisible lines of the queue were reinforced by the very visible threat of the pillory standing in the center of the square. Speaking of the pillory, look over to the center of the market. You might see a trader locked in the stocks, rotting vegetables piled around his feet. He's likely there for forestalling. This was a specific crime where a merchant would buy up goods before they reached the market, effectively cutting the line on a macro scale to artificially inflate prices. The medieval world hated line cutters so much they made it a specific category of criminal. They believed in the just price and the moral economy. The idea that you could just charge whatever the market would bear was considered sinful. The queue was the physical manifestation of this moral order. Everyone waits their turn. Everyone pays the same price. As you shuffle forward inch by inch, you notice the posture of the people in line. They are guarded. They clutch their purses tightly against their chests. Pickpockets love queues. A queue is a buffet for a thief. Everyone is distracted, facing forward, and pressed together. You feel a hand brush against your tunic. You spin around. A young boy looks up at you, innocent eyes wide. "Just passing through, m'lord," he mumbles. You check your belt pouch. It's still there. You got lucky. Historians and sociologists still debate the spontaneous queue. Did people naturally start lining up because it was efficient, or did it require men with heavy sticks to enforce it? Well, there is evidence that market reeves, officials with the power to fine and arrest, patrolled these lines specifically to stop shoving and jostling. It suggests that the natural human instinct is the scrum, and the queue is an artificial imposition of order that we constantly have to relearn. Every time you see a chaotic rush for a new iPhone or a stampede at a concert, you are seeing the medieval scrum breaking through the veneer of the modern queue. You are now 3 people away from the counter. The smell of the bread is intoxicating. It's heavy, yeasty, and warm. But there's another danger here: horses. The market isn't a pedestrian zone. It's a shared space. Carts, horses, and livestock are moving through the same narrow channels as the shoppers. A horse doesn't care about the queue. A horse is 1,000 pounds of muscle that will step on your foot without a second thought. You hear the clatter of hooves on stone. A rider is pushing through the crowd. "Make way," he shouts. The queue ripples. You have to compress, squeezing in tight against the stall to let the beast pass. This is the origin of the squeeze past. You know that awkward move you do in a movie theater row where you suck in your stomach and shuffle sideways, apologizing to everyone's knees? That was invented here to avoid being crushed between a stall and a cartwheel. It's a survival compression. Finally, you reach the front. The baker looks exhausted. He's covered in flour and sweat. You point to a loaf. You don't hand him the money directly into his palm. Remember the touch avoidance? You place the coin on the counter. He inspects it. Coin clipping, shaving the edges off silver coins, is rampant, so he bites it or weighs it. Satisfied, he slides the loaf across the wood. You grab the bread. It's hot. You tuck it under your cloak, shielding it like a precious gem. You have survived the queue. You have successfully navigated the most dangerous social geometry of the city. But now you have to get home. The sun is dipping lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the mud. The market square was chaotic, but the narrow streets leading back to your lodging are a different kind of hazard. They are tight, dark, and filled with a slurry of filth that defies description. And you are about to learn that walking down the street isn't just about putting one foot in front of the other. It is a rigid, hierarchical dance where yielding the right of way is the only thing keeping you clean, dry, and untrampled. You turn away from the stall, clutching your prize, and step into the muck. You leave the frantic energy of the market square and turn into a side street. The noise drops from a roar to a dull hum, but the physical environment deteriorates instantly. If the market was chaotic, the street is a biological hazard zone. You look down. The ground is not solids. It's a thick, churning paste of mud, animal dung, kitchen slops, and things you'd rather not identify, all churned up as wagon wheels and hooves. There are no sidewalks. There is no drainage system other than a shallow ditch running down the center of the lane, the kennel. You take a step, and your boot sinks 2 inches into the sludge. The suction makes a wet squelch sound as you pull your foot free. This isn't just unpleasant, it's the defining feature of your commute. In this environment, giving way isn't polite, it's a calculation of hygiene and rank. Imagine 2 people walking toward each other on this narrow path. The street slopes downward from the buildings toward the central kennel. This means the ground near the walls is higher, drier, and slightly cleaner. The ground in the middle is a swamp. Therefore, the strip of land next to the wall is prime real estate. It's the high road. This is the origin of the phrase, going to the wall. In the Middle Ages, the person of higher status took the wall side. If a knight met a peasant, the peasant was expected to step into the muck to let the knight pass on the dry strip. It was a physical manifestation of the social order. The rich stayed dry, the poor got dirty. You see a man approaching you. He's well dressed, wearing a velvet cap and a cloak that looks far too expensive to be near this much manure. He is walking purposefully near the wall of a wattle and daub house. You are carrying a loaf of bread and wearing a travel-stained tunic. The calculus is instant. You don't need a rule book. You know that if you don't move, he might shove you, or worse, his retainers might do it for him. You step aside. You trudge into the center of the lane, feeling the muck splash up against your shins. He passes you without a glance, keeping his velvet shoes relatively pristine. This is the brutal reality of right-of-way. It's not about traffic flow, it's about who has to suffer the filth. But there's a darker danger from above. You hear a creak, like a window shutter opening. You instinctively look up and then immediately flinch away, covering your bread. Gardez-vous. The shout comes from a second-story window. It's a corruption of the French gare de l'eau, watch out for the water. But it's rarely just water. A bucket of chamber pot contents, night soil, urine, the works, comes cascading down. It splashes into the central kennel, sending a spray of liquid filth into the air. If you had been walking in the middle of the street, without looking up, you would have been anointed. This is why wide-brimmed hats were invented. We tend to think of the musketeer hat or the pilgrim hat as fashion statements. In reality, they were umbrellas for sewage. A wide brim protected your face and shoulders from the aerial bombardment of urban living. When a gentleman bowed and swept his hat off with a flourish, he was effectively dumping the accumulated debris off the brim before entering a house. It adds a whole new layer of grossness to those dashing period dramas, doesn't it? You navigate around the fresh puddle. The street is getting darker. The overhanging upper stories of the timber-framed houses block out most of the sky. These are jetties, where the second floor sticks out further than the first to maximize square footage in crowded cities. Sometimes they almost touch in the middle, creating a tunnel effect. It's claustrophobic. And then there are the pigs. You hear a grunt and a scuffle. A massive sow, semi-feral and looking for scraps, comes trotting out of an alleyway. In many medieval cities, pigs were the sanitation department. They roamed the streets, eating the garbage and filth. They were useful, but they were also dangerous. A full-grown pig can break a leg or bite a child. You give the pig a wide berth. In legal records from the time, there are actual cases of pigs being put on trial for murder after attacking infants. It sounds like a Monty Python sketch, but it was a deadly serious attempt to impose order on a chaotic world. As you walk, you notice the left side rule. In some regions, people walked on the left. Why? Because of the sword. If you walk on the left, your right hand, your sword hand, is facing the oncoming traffic. If the person passing you decides to attack, you can draw your weapon and defend yourself without your body blocking your own arm. It's the same logic that eventually dictated which side of the road we drive on in countries like the UK and Japan. The roads were designed for armed defense first, transportation second. You finally make it to the end of the street. You are mud-splattered, tired, and your boots are heavy with clay. But you have reached a slightly more open area. The sun has fully set now. The city is transforming. The noise of commerce is dying down, replaced by a suspicious silence. This is the transition to nighttime order. In the modern world, the city never sleeps. Streetlights buzz, cars hum, and 24-hour diners serve pancakes. Here, night is a shroud. There is no public lighting. The moon is your only friend, and if it's cloudy, you are walking in a void. You clutch your bread tighter. You need to get indoors. Being out after dark isn't just risky. In many places, it's illegal. The curfew bell is about to ring. Curfew comes from the French couvre-feu, cover the fire. It was a signal to dampen your hearths to prevent the wooden city from burning down while everyone slept. But it was also a signal to get off the streets. If you are found wandering now, the night watch won't ask if you're lost. They will assume you are a thief, an arsonist, or a spy. You need to move quietly. You need to make yourself invisible. The confident stride of the day is replaced by the burglar creep of the night. You step carefully. You don't want to splash. You don't want to kick a loose stone. Silence is your new armor. The etiquette of the night is simple. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. And if you see someone else, you don't greet them. You hide. You slip into the shadows of a doorway as a patrol walks by, their torches casting flickering, terrifying shapes on the walls. They are carrying heavy staves. They are looking for trouble. You hold your breath. This is the ultimate introversion. The city has turned into a predator, and you are trying not to be prey. As they pass, you exhale. You are almost at your lodging, but you realize that even inside, the rules of safety continue. The supernatural world is waking up. The darkness isn't just an absence of light. To the medieval mind, it's a presence. It's the time of demons, spirits, and things that steal your breath. You reach for the door handle. It's iron, cold. You pause. You've successfully navigated the physical threats of the day, the daggers, the poison, the crush of the market, the filth of the street. But now, as you prepare to enter the domestic space for the night, you have to deal with the spiritual threats. The polite little rituals you do before bed, they aren't about hygiene. They are about keeping your soul inside your body. The sun has vanished completely now. The city, which was a riot of color and noise just an hour ago, has been swallowed by a suffocating, inky blackness. In the modern world, you have never experienced true darkness. You have streetlights, glow-in-the-dark exit signs, the standby LEDs on your television, and the eternal light pollution reflecting off the clouds. Here, when the moon is obscured by thick woolen clouds, the darkness is absolute. It presses against your eyes. It feels heavy, almost physical, like a velvet blindfold that you can't take off. You freeze in the doorway of your lodging. You hear footsteps, click, clack, click, clack. They are rhythmic, heavy, and deliberate. It's the night watch. You hold your breath, pressing your back against the rough timber of the doorframe. You are now practicing the art of nighttime silence, a form of etiquette that was less about being considerate to sleeping neighbors and more about not being arrested for a felony. In medieval law, the night was not just a time of day, it was a legally distinct jurisdiction. The moment the curfew bell rang, the rules of society inverted. During the day, honest men walked openly and spoke loudly. At night, honest men were indoors, asleep. Therefore, anyone moving around outside was by definition dishonest. There was a specific legal term for people wandering after dark: nightwalkers, or in Latin, noctivigator. It wasn't a description, it was an accusation. If you were caught nightwalking without a torch and a very good excuse, like fetching a midwife, you could be detained, fined, or put in the stocks. This is why you are standing so still. You are trying to mute your existence. In our time, we whisper at night to be polite. We tiptoe to the fridge for a midnight snack so we don't wake up our partner or the dog. It's a courtesy. In the 14th century, walking softly was a survival tactic, but paradoxically, walking too softly was also a crime. It's a terrifying double bind. If you stomp around in heavy boots, you attract the watch, who will assume you are a drunkard or a brawler. But if you creep around silently, wearing soft-soled shoes, you fit the profile of a cutpurse or an assassin. There were actually laws in some European cities that regulated footwear at night. Wearing shoes that didn't make noise could be considered evidence of criminal intent. Imagine getting a ticket today because your sneakers were suspiciously quiet. You wait for the footsteps to fade. The silence returns, but it's not peaceful. It's the silence of a held breath. You slip inside the lodging, closing the door with agonizing slowness to prevent the hinges from groaning. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by the dying embers of the hearth. You have guests here, perhaps family, perhaps other travelers. You need to communicate, but you cannot speak at normal volume. You lean in and whisper, "Did you get the bread?" The origin of the indoor whisper is rooted in the architecture of conspiracy. Medieval walls were thin. Wattle and daub is basically just woven sticks and mud. It has the acoustic insulation properties of a cardboard box. In a society rife with informants, spies, and neighbors who would happily report you for heresy or treason to settle a grudge, raising your voice at night was dangerous. To speak loudly was to broadcast your business to the street. To whisper was to keep your secrets and your head safe. But the biggest reason for the repressive order of the night wasn't theft or treason, it was fire. Arson was the nuclear weapon of the Middle Ages. In a city built entirely of dry timber, thatch, and pitch, one spark could incinerate 1,000 homes in an hour. There were no fire hydrants, no engine trucks, just a line of panicked people passing leather buckets. Because of this, the fear of fire was pathological. If you were seen striking a flint at night or carrying an uncovered candle, you were treated with the same level of hysteria as someone waving a loaded gun in an airport today. The curfew law, couvre-feu covering the fire, required everyone to bank their hearths and extinguish open flames. This is why lights out was literal. This fear created a culture of aggressive vigilance. If you smelled smoke, you didn't just check your oven, you screamed. And this brings us to the hue and cry. This was a legal obligation. If a crime was committed, a robbery, an assault, or a fire, the victim would shout, "Thief! Fire! Help!" Every able-bodied man within earshot was legally required to drop what they were doing, grab a weapon, and join the chase. If you heard the cry and ignored it, you could be fined or imprisoned as an accomplice. You were the police force, so silence at night was also a way to avoid triggering a false alarm. If you knocked over a bench and it sounded like a door being kicked in, you might accidentally trigger a hue and cry. Suddenly, 50 armed neighbors would be banging on your door, pumped full of adrenaline, looking for a bandit. Trying to explain, "Sorry, I just tripped over the cat," while they are holding pitchforks is not a conversation you want to have. Historians and anthropologists debate the psychological impact of this night terror. Some, like the historian A. Roger E. Kirch, argue that the pre-industrial night was a separate kingdom, a time of absolute dread where the supernatural and the criminal merged. Others suggest that people adapted, that the night was actually a time of freedom for the lower classes, a time to gamble, drink, and socialize away from the prying eyes of the church and the Lord, provided they did it quietly. They argue that the polite silence was actually a cover for a vibrant, illicit underground nightlife. You finally settle down on a straw mattress. It rustles loudly. Oh, you wince. Even the bedding is noisy. You are tired, your body aching from the tension of the day. You are safe inside. The door is barred, the fire is banked, the watch has passed. But as you lie there, staring up at the blackened ceiling beams, you feel a tickle in your nose. It starts small, a little itch at the back of your sinuses, probably dust from the straw or the lingering smoke from the hearth. You try to suppress it. You pinch your nose. You hold your breath. But the biology of the sneeze is powerful. It builds like a pressure wave in your chest. Achoo! The sound rips through the quiet room. It's loud, but the immediate reaction from the people around you isn't annoyance. It's not shh or keep it down. Almost in unison, the voices from the darkness cry out with urgency. God bless you. Help you. May the devil miss you. In your time, bless you is a meaningless reflex, something you say when a stranger sneezes in an elevator. Here, in the superstitious dark of the medieval bedroom, it is a spiritual shield deployment. You have just performed a bodily function that many believe has momentarily ejected your soul from your body, leaving you a hollow vessel waiting to be snatched by the entities that live in the shadows. You wipe your nose, your heart racing again. You thought the danger was over when you locked the door. You were wrong. The physical world is scary, but the spiritual world is where the real etiquette battles are fought. You are about to learn why a simple sneeze was considered a near-death experience, and why manners are the only thing standing between you and demonic possession. The echo of your sneeze dies away in the dark, damp room, but the chorus of God bless you hangs in the air like the smoke from a snuffed candle. You lie there, heart hammering, wiping the moisture from your upper lip. In the 21st century, a sneeze is a minor annoyance, usually a sign that the pollen count is high or you're allergic to the cat. You say, "Excuse me," grab a tissue, and move on. It's a biological glitch, nothing more. But here, in the superstition-saturated air of the Middle Ages, you have just undergone a little death. Let's unpack the theology of the sneeze. To the medieval mind, and indeed to the ancients before them, the soul is not an abstract concept locked deep in the brain. It is physical, it is breath. The Latin word spiritus means both spirit and breath. The Greek pneuma carries the same double meaning. Your life force is literally the air circulating in your lungs. Therefore, a sneeze, which is a violent, involuntary explosion of air from your body, is technically a spiritual evacuation event. When you sneezed just now, the people in the room genuinely feared that you had ejected your soul. For a split second, your body was a vacant house, the front door wide open, the lights on, and the owner standing on the front lawn looking confused. And in a world teeming with invisible demons, wandering spirits, and opportunistic imps, an empty body is free real estate. The bless you, or Gesundheit, or Salud, is a verbal force field. It is a rapid response prayer designed to cram your soul back down your throat before something else takes its place. It's like hitting save on a document before the computer crashes. The people around you aren't being polite. They are performing an emergency exorcism. They are calling on the divine to guard the empty vessel until the soul can settle back into its seat. This fear of the open mouth extends to yawning too. You feel a yawn coming on. It's been a long, terrifying day after all. As your jaw unhinges and your mouth opens wide, your hand shoots up to cover it. Why? Today, your mom told you to cover your mouth because it's rude to show people your tonsils or hit them with your coffee breath. But the origin is much darker. The open mouth during a yawn was seen as a portal. It was a vulnerability. A demon could fly right in. Or conversely, your soul could drift out. The sign of the cross was often made over the mouth during a yawn, a gesture that eventually simplified into just the polite hand cover we use today. You are essentially barring the gates of the castle to keep the invaders out. But there is a grimmer, more tangible history to the sneeze that haunts the collective memory of the people in this room. It ties back to the single, most traumatic event in medieval history, the Black Death. In the mid-14th century, the plague tore through Europe like a wildfire, killing perhaps half the population. It was an apocalypse that unfolded in real time. One of the early symptoms of the pneumonic plague, the version that attacked the lungs, was violent sneezing. If you started sneezing, it wasn't allergies. It was the bell tolling for your funeral. You had days, maybe hours, to live. History tells us that Pope Gregory the Great, though some timeline pedants will argue he was much earlier, during the plague of Justinian, establishing the tradition that was later revived, ordered unceasing prayer to combat the pestilence. The moment someone sneezed, it was a signal that the infection had taken hold. The phrase, "God bless you," was a final benediction. It was a way of saying, "You are dying, and I am praying for your soul's safe passage, because there is nothing else we can do." So when your roommates shouted "bless you" just now, they were subconsciously checking you for plague. They were reacting to a biological alarm. The politeness is scar tissue from a societal trauma. It's a ritualized survival check that stuck around long after the bacteria went dormant. Historians and folklorists love to argue about which theory is the true origin. The soul ejection camp points to ancient cultures, like the Romans, who would say, "Jupiter preserve you," arguing that the superstition predates the plague. They claim the plague just reinforced an existing fear. The plague origin camp argues that the specific urgency and the blessing formula are distinctly Christian responses to epidemic disease. Then there's the good luck faction, who point out that the Greeks sometimes thought a sneeze was a sign of divine favor, a nod from the gods. Odyssey, Book 17. Telemachus sneezes, and everyone laughs and takes it as a good omen. It's a scholarly bar fight, but for you, shivering in the dark, the distinction doesn't matter. You just don't want a demon in your lungs. There is a bizarre fringe belief from this era concerning sneeze omens. Some almanacs and wise women claimed that the time you sneezed determined your fate. A sneeze before breakfast, you'll hear news before nightfall. A sneeze on a Tuesday, you'll kiss a stranger. A sneeze to the right, good luck. A sneeze to the left, disaster. It's the medieval equivalent of checking your horoscope. You find yourself mentally replaying your sneeze. Did you turn your head to the left? Great. Now you have to worry about bad luck on top of the demons. You pull the scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. The adrenaline fades, leaving you with the heavy exhaustion of the traveler. The room is quiet again, save for the rhythmic breathing of your companions. You are safe. Your soul is presumably back inside your ribcage. But then you hear it creak. It comes from the corner of the room, a dry, sharp sound of wood settling, or footsteps, or something else. Your mind races. In a world lit by fire and defined by shadows, every noise is a potential threat. It could be a rat. It could be a thief testing the window latch. Or given the mindset we've just established, it could be the little people, the fae, or the spirits of the ancestors who dwell in the very structure of the house. You feel a compulsion to do something to ward off the bad luck you might have just invited with that left-leaning sneeze. You reach out your hand in the darkness. You feel the rough, hewn timber of the bed frame. It's oak, solid, grounding, enduring. You tap it with your knuckles. Knock, knock. You breathe a sigh of relief. You have just performed knocking on wood. In your modern life, you do this when you say something like, "I haven't had a flat tire in years." You knock on a wooden desk to avoid jinxing it. You think it's just a figure of speech. But here in the dark, touching that wood is a calculated theological transaction. You aren't just hitting a piece of furniture, you are waking up the guardians. You see, the church may rule the day with its bells and Latin masses, but the old pagan world rules the night. And the old world believes that trees are alive. They are the dwelling places of dryads, spirits, and gods. The oak, in particular, is sacred to Thor, to Zeus, to the ancient druids. It is a conduit of power. By tapping the wood, you are doing one of two things, depending on which grandmother you ask. You are either making a noise to distract the listening spirits, the jealous ones who hear you boasting about your good health and want to ruin it, or you are physically rousing the good spirit inside the wood to come out and protect you. It's a protection racket with nature. You acknowledge the spirit, you show respect, and in return, it doesn't let the roof collapse on you. You pull your hand back under the covers. The wood feels solid. The ritual is complete. You have sneezed and been blessed and knocked on the holy oak for good measure. You have layered your defenses like a knight putting on armor. But tomorrow is a big day. It's your birthday. Well, not your birthday, but let's say it is for the sake of the narrative. You might be expecting cake, balloons, and a song. But you should be expecting fire, noise, and fear. Because in the history of boring traditions, the birthday party is perhaps the most heavily weaponized ritual of them all. You lie there in the pre-dawn grayness, your knuckles still tingling slightly from rapping against the bedpost. The echo of that hollow thok-thok sound seems to linger in the room. You've done the ritual. You've knocked on wood. But as the adrenaline of the sneeze fades and your heart rate slows, you start to realize that you are trapped in a house that isn't just a shelter, it's a spiritual minefield. You didn't just knock on a piece of furniture, you knocked on a dormant god. Welcome to the animistic reality of the Middle Ages. In your modern world, materials are dead. Wood is just cellulose and lignin. Stone is just minerals. Iron is just an element on the periodic table. You buy a table from IKEA, and you don't worry about whether the spirit of the particle board is going to seek revenge on you for spilling coffee. But here, the line between object and entity is blurry to the point of non-existence. The house you are sleeping in is, in a very real sense, alive. The logic of knocking on wood goes back to a time long before cathedrals and crusades. It is rooted in the deep, primordial forest of the European pagan imagination. To the Celts, the Germans, and the Norse, trees were the original temples. The oak was the dwelling place of the thunder god. The ash was the spine of the universe, Yggdrasil. The willow was a watcher of secrets. When you cut a tree down to build a house, you weren't killing the spirit, you were relocating it. The dryad, the sprite, the genius loci, whatever you want to call it, was still in there, trapped in the grain of the timber beams above your head and the bed frame beneath your back. So, why knocks? There are two competing theories in the survival guide of the superstitious, and both are equally terrifying. The first is the alarm clock theory. By knocking, you are physically waking up the spirit of the tree. You are saying, "Hey, wake up, I need a favor." You are rousing the guardian to stand sentry over you. It's like banging on the door of a security guard who fell asleep on the job. You need him alert because you just did something dangerous. You boasted, or you sneezed, or you just felt a chill. The second theory is the jamming signal. This one assumes that the world is full of hostile, jealous spirits, the evil eye or mischievous imps who drift around listening for human happiness. In this worldview, happiness is a beacon. If you say, "I have such a healthy baby," or "My harvest will be great this year," you are painting a target on your back. The gods and spirits are envious. They hate hubris. They love to take a confident human down a peg. This is the nemesis concept from the Greeks. Therefore, when you accidentally boast, "I haven't been sick all winter," you panic. You have just broadcast your vulnerability. You knock on wood immediately. The sound is meant to drown out your voice, to create a sonic interference so the jealous spirits don't hear your boast. Or you are asking the tree spirit to absorb the bad luck for you, grounding the lightning strike of fate into the earth. This habit was so deeply ingrained that even when Christianity took over, it couldn't kill it. The church, being the master of rebranding, simply adapted it. Knocking on wood became touching the wood of the cross. In the medieval Christian mind, touching a wooden rosary or a crucifix was a way to invoke the protection of Jesus. So you have this perfect cultural hybrid, a ritual that feels vaguely pious, but is powered by the engine of ancient tree worship. It's a pagan app running on a Christian operating system. But the wood isn't the only part of the house you have to worry about. Look at the door. In the morning, when you leave this room, you will have to cross the threshold. In your time, a threshold is just a strip of metal or wood on the floor that you trip over. Here, it is a spiritual border control. The threshold, threscan in Old English, is the boundary between the inner sanctuary, safe, and the outer world, dangerous, but it's also a place of limbo. It belongs to neither the inside nor the outside. Ancient folklore held that spirits, often the spirits of ancestors or household guardians, lived under the threshold. This is why it is considered incredibly bad luck to step on the threshold. You must step over it. If you step on it, you are stepping on the spirits' faces. It's rude, and it weakens the barrier. This is the unromantic origin of carrying the bride over the threshold. It wasn't about the groom showing off his gym gains. It was a safety precaution. A bride, on her wedding day, was considered to be in a state of high spiritual vulnerability, a transition state. If she tripped on the threshold, it was a disastrous omen for the marriage. It meant the household spirits had rejected her, or that she had brought bad luck in. To eliminate the risk of a clumsy stumble, the groom would pick her up and airlift her over the danger zone. He wasn't being romantic. He was ensuring she didn't accidentally curse their future. As you look around the room, your eyes catch the glint of iron. Maybe it's the latch on the door or a horseshoe nailed above the lintel. Touch wood has a tougher, grittier cousin, touch iron. If wood is about protection and absorption, iron is about aggression. Iron is the enemy of the Fae. In almost all European folklore, fairies, elves, and the little people cannot stand iron. It burns them. It disrupts their magic. It is the anti-magic metal. This is why you nail a horseshoe over the door. It's not a decoration. It's an electric fence for goblins. The iron creates a magnetic field of repulsion that keeps the chaotic forces of the wild out of your civilized home. This belief was so strong that people would put iron scissors under a baby's crib to prevent changelings, fairies stealing the baby and replacing it with one of their own. They would carry iron nails in their pockets when walking through the woods. If you suspect the milk has been bewitched, i.e., it soured too fast, you might put a hot iron poker into it to drive the witch out. So if knocking on wood is asking a friend for help, touching iron is pulling out a shotgun. The historian Keith Thomas wrote a massive book called Religion and the Decline of Magic, and he points out that for the medieval person, there was no distinction between physics and magic. If a horseshoe stopped a demon, that was just a physical property of the iron, just like being heavy or hard. It was simply how the universe worked. You aren't being superstitious, you are being practical. You are using the tools available to you to manipulate the invisible forces that want to give you a fever or rot your teeth. You sit up in bed. The morning light is starting to bleed through the cracks in the shutters. The wood of the bed frame is silent now. You've survived the night. You've navigated the handshake, the salt, the sneeze, and the spirits in the timber. You feel a sense of relief. But then you remember what day it is. It's the anniversary of your birth. In the modern world, this means you are expecting a calm day. Maybe a card, maybe a cake with some candles. You think of birthdays as a celebration of life, a joyful marker of another year past. You are wrong. In the context of history, a birthday is a moment of extreme peril. It is a spiritual weak point. Just like the bride at the threshold, a person on their birthday is in a state of flux. You are numerically transitioning. The protective seal of the previous year has worn off, and the new year hasn't set yet. You are exposed. The cake, the candles, the happy birthday song, and the noisemakers, none of these things were designed for fun. They were designed for defense. You are about to discover that your childhood party was actually a sophisticated ritual to keep you from being dragged off by the same spirits you just knocked on wood to avoid. Get ready. We are going to light some fires, not to make a wish, but to build a wall of light against the darkness. You are sitting at the rough wooden table again, but this time the mood is different. The atmosphere is charged with a manic, forced cheerfulness. Your messmates, the merchant, the cleric, the sweaty baker, have gathered around you. They are slapping you on the back a little too hard. They are shouting a little too loudly. And in the center of the table, someone places a round, flat cake. It's not a triple chocolate ganache explosion. It's a dense, honey-sweetened bread, perhaps studded with dried fruit if you're wealthy, or just sweetened with carrots if you aren't. But the most important feature isn't the flavor, it's the fire. Stuck into the top of the cake are burning candles. In the dim, smoky hall, they cast flickering shadows against the faces of your friends, making them look slightly demonic. You stare at the flames. In your time, this is the moment you close your eyes and wish for a pony or a promotion. Here, you are staring at a perimeter defense system. Welcome to the birthday party, or as I like to call it, Operation Keep the Soul Inside the Body. To understand why we celebrate birthdays, you have to understand that for a huge chunk of human history, the day of your birth was considered a moment of intense spiritual danger. It's a liminal time, a threshold in time, just like the doorway is a threshold in space. On your birthday, the veil between the world of the living and the world of the spirits is thin. You are technically 1 year older, but spiritually, you are shedding your skin. You are raw, vulnerable, and highly visible to the supernatural predators we talked about earlier. The candles are not there for decoration. They are there to create a ring of fire. Fire is the oldest purifier. It frightens beasts, both wolves and werewolves. By surrounding the cake, which represents your life, your sustenance, with fire, you are creating a consecrated circle that evil spirits cannot cross. The Greeks were doing this long before the Middle Ages. They offered round cakes with candles to Artemis, the goddess of the moon. The glow of the candles mimicked the moonlight, and the smoke carried their prayers up to Olympus. But in the folk horror logic of the medieval village, the light serves a dual purpose. It honors the good spirits, your personal demon or guardian angel, and blinds the bad ones. It's a spiritual flashbang grenade. Now think about the happy birthday song. In the modern world, it's a droning, off-key dirge that everyone awkwardly mumbles while waiting for sugar. But look at the structure of it. It's a chant. It's a repetitive incantation performed by a group in unison. You didn't invite your friends to this party because you like them. You invited them because you need a goon squad. In the ancient belief system, solitude on your birthday was a death sentence. If you were alone, the gloomy spirits, or the trolls in Scandinavia, or the fairies in Ireland, could swoop in and steal your luck or give you the evil eye. You need a crowd. The noise of the party, the shouting, the singing, the clinking of mugs is a sonic weapon. Well, this is the origin of those annoying paper blowers and noisemakers you see at children's parties. They aren't just for fun, they are demon scarers. They serve the same function as church bells or fireworks. They create a chaotic sonic environment that spirits find intolerable. A demon wants to whisper lies in your ear. It can't do that if your uncle is blowing a tin trumpet in your face. So the party is actually a protective huddle. Your friends are surrounding you, making noise and lighting fires to keep you safe until the clock strikes midnight and the danger passes. Then comes the blowing out of the candles. This is the climax of the ritual. Today we say, make a wish. But historically, this is a form of sympathetic magic. The smoke from the extinguished candle rises upward. It physically travels from the earth to the sky. The belief was that your wish, your silent prayer, would stick to the smoke and be carried directly to the ears of the gods. If you blow them all out in one breath, it's a sign of strong, vital force. Good lungs, cheers to strong soul, and it sends a massive consolidated signal to the heavens. If you miss a candle, that's bad. That means a prayer got stuck. It means your connection to the divine is spotty. It's the medieval equivalent of having one bar of Wi-Fi. There is a fascinating scholarly debate, because of course there is, about whether medieval Christians even celebrated birthdays at all. For a long time, the church frowned on birthdays. They considered them a pagan custom. The logic was, you are born with original sin, why celebrate the day you entered the world of sin? The only people in the Bible who celebrate birthdays are Pharaoh and Herod, and both of those parties ended with someone getting executed, the baker and John the Baptist, respectively. Not exactly a glowing endorsement. Instead, medieval people often celebrated their name day, the feast day of the saint they were named after. If your name is John, your big party is on St. John's Day, not the day you were actually born. This was safer. You were celebrating the saint, not yourself. It was less hubristic, less likely to attract the attention of the envious spirits. The modern birthday party, with the cake and candles, is really a 19th century revival that mashed up the Greek Artemis cakes with the German Kinderfest traditions. But you, sitting at this table in our hypothetical timeline, are hedging your bets. You are doing the name day thing and the pagan candle thing. You blow out the candles. The room goes dark for a second, filled with the acrid, comforting smell of tallow smoke. The smoke rises. The wish is sent. The demons presumably are confused by the sudden darkness and the smell of burnt wick. You cut the cake. It's dry and tastes of yeast, but you eat it. Sharing the cake is another layer of the bond. By eating the same food, you and your guests are chemically binding yourselves together. You are reinforcing the alliance. The party winds down. The noise fades. The protection ritual has been a success. You have survived another year, and more importantly, you have survived the day of the transition. But the night is not over. You need to step outside again. Maybe you need to use the privy, which is a whole other horror story we'll skip for the sake of your sleep. Or maybe you are heading back to your own quarters. As you step out into the cool night air, you pull your hat down tight. It's a hood. Really? A chaperone? It keeps your head warm, yes. But it also keeps your thoughts in. And more importantly, it hides your identity. But then you see a figure approaching. It's a man of higher rank. A knight, perhaps, or a guild master. You know what you have to do. You have to perform the doffing of the cap. In your time, taking off a hat is a sign of mild respect, something you do in a church or maybe during the national anthem. But here, the act of uncovering your head is a military strip search. You are about to expose your head to a man who carries a sword. You are about to prove, once again, that you are not an assassin hiding a helmet under your hood. You are standing in the muddy street, the cool night air biting at your cheeks. You are wearing a chaperone, a heavy woolen hood that wraps around your head and neck like a medieval balaclava. It's incredibly practical. It keeps the wind out of your ears. It protects your neck from the damp, and it creates a cozy, private little sound booth for your thoughts. In a world without central heating, this hood is your primary environmental control system. But as the high-ranking figure approaches, let's say it's the local sheriff or a knight returning from patrol, you instinctively reach up. You grab the thick roll of fabric at the top of your head and pull the entire apparatus off. The cold air rushes in, chilling your sweaty scalp. You stand there, bareheaded and shivering, while he passes. You have just performed the doffing of the cap. In your modern life, taking off a hat is a fading tradition. Maybe you take off a baseball cap during the national anthem, or your grandmother yells at you if you wear a beanie at the dinner table. We tend to think of this rule as purely arbitrary, a random hoop to jump through to show you are respectable. But the origin of this gesture is not about respectability, it is about disarmament. The word doff is actually a contraction of the Middle English phrase do off. Its opposite is don, or do on. So when you doff your hat, you are literally doing off your protection. To understand the stakes, you have to know about a specific piece of dirty fighting technology called the secret. In the Middle Ages, armor wasn't always visible. While knights wore flashy plate armor for tournaments and battles, people expecting trouble in the city, assassins, mercenaries, or paranoid merchants, often wore hidden armor. The secret, or cerveliere, was a small, skull-fitting iron cap. It looked like a metal bowl. You would wear it underneath a floppy woolen hat or a large hood. To the naked eye, you looked like a harmless civilian. But if someone tried to club you over the head or slash you with a sword, the blade would clang against the hidden iron, saving your life and likely breaking the attacker's wrist. This made the hat a suspicious object. A man wearing a hat in the presence of a superior was effectively a masked variable. Was he just keeping his ears warm, or was he armored for a fight? By removing your hat, you are performing a voluntary strip search of your cranium. You are exposing your scalp. You are proving that there is no iron secret hidden underneath the wool. You are saying, look, I am a soft target. If you wanted to hit me in the head right now, I would have zero defense. It is a declaration of vulnerability, similar to the open hand or the exposed neck. You are giving the knight the tactical advantage of knowing he can kill you with a single blow. This logic extends to the face. The hood acts as blinders. It restricts your peripheral vision, yes, but it also hides your eyes. In a society that relies heavily on reading intent through micro-expressions, the weapon check of the eyes we talked about earlier, hiding your face is an act of aggression. It implies you have something to hide. When you pull back your hood, you are restoring the line of sight. You are allowing the superior to scan your face for deceit. This is the direct ancestor of the military salute. Picture a modern soldier saluting. The hand snaps up to the brow, palm flat or facing out, then cuts away. It's sharp, precise. But rewind that gesture a few hundred years. Imagine a knight in full plate armor. His face is completely covered by a steel visor. When he meets a friendly commander or a king, he needs to identify himself. He reaches up with his gauntleted hand, grabs the lip of the visor and lifts it up. I see you. I am revealing my face. I am not an anonymous killing machine. I am Sir John. The motion of the hand going to the forehead is a vestigial reenactment of lifting that heavy steel visor. Over centuries, as helmets disappeared from daily uniforms, the motion was streamlined. The visor lift became the hat tip, The hat tip became the hand-to-brow salute, but the core message remains: I am revealing myself to you. This also explains why it is considered rude to wear a hat indoors, especially while eating. We touched on this briefly, but let's drill down. The dining hall is a sanctuary. It is a place of truce. If you walk into a friend's house and keep your hat on, in the medieval code, you are signaling that you are not staying, or worse, that you do not feel safe enough to disarm. It's like wearing a bulletproof vest to a dinner party. It insults the host because it implies that his house is not secure or that he cannot protect you. Take your hat off translates to relax. You are safe here. Stop acting like you're about to be ambushed. There is an interesting gender divide here as well. Historically, women were exempt from the hats off rule. In church or indoors, men removed their hats. Women kept their bonnets or veils on. Why? Because women were not expected to be combatants. A woman wearing a headdress wasn't suspected of hiding a secret iron helmet or preparing for a duel. Her head covering was a symbol of modesty and status, not a potential tactical camouflage. Therefore, she wasn't required to perform the ritual of disarmament. She was already considered harmless by the sexist standards of the day. As you stand there in the street, holding your hood in your hand, you feel the wind ruffle your hair. The night nods, a minimal, efficient acknowledgement, and rides past. He has verified you. You are not a threat. You can put your hat back on. You pull the warm wool back over your ears. The relief is instant. You are back in your cocoon, but there is one final layer to this unmasking. It's about the eyes. In the Middle Ages, direct eye contact was a tricky thing. Staring was aggressive. It was a challenge. Mad-dogging someone, locking eyes and refusing to look away, was a prelude to a fight. But avoiding eye contact was shifty. It meant you were lying. The polite gaze, the one you just used with the knight, is a complex middle ground. You meet his eyes for a second to acknowledge him, then you lower your gaze slightly. You don't look at the floor, submission, shame, but you don't lock on and challenge. You look at his chin or his horse's neck. It's a soft eyes approach. This visual etiquette is still with us. Think about walking down a city street today. You pass hundreds of people. You don't stare at them. You perform civil inattention. You acknowledge they exist. You adjust your path to avoid collision, but you don't engage. If you stare at someone on the subway, you are breaking the social contract. You are being weird or threatening. That instinct to avert your gaze is the modern urban version of the peasant lowering his eyes before the night. It's a way of saying, I am not a threat, please let me pass. And think about sunglasses. When you are talking to someone and you take your sunglasses off, you are doing a doffing. You are removing a barrier. You are showing your eyes to build trust. If you keep them on, you remain inscrutable, armored. You are hiding your intent. It's the same psychological mechanic as the visor, just with polarized lenses instead of steel. You are almost at the end of your journey. You have navigated the entire day. You started with the handshake of the morning, survived the deadly dinner table, fought your way through the queue, whispered through the dark, and now you have doffed your cap to authority. You are tired. The adrenaline that has kept you alive, the constant low-level buzz of survival anxiety, is fading into a heavy, leaden fatigues. You have followed the rules. You have played the game. And because you played it well, you are still alive. You are still whole. You reach the door of your final destination. It's time to stop looking over your shoulder. It's time to stop analyzing every hand gesture and eye movement. The history of politeness is a history of terror, yes, but it is also a history of adaptation. We learned to be nice so we wouldn't have to be dead. As you push the door open, you prepare to leave the Middle Ages behind. We are going to fast forward. We are going to watch these sharp, bloody rituals dull over time. The dagger will become the butter knife. The iron helmet will become the baseball cap. The desperate prayer against the plague will become a reflexive, bless you. The danger is passing. The storm is quieting. It's time to see how the story ends. You open your eyes. The mud, the stench of the open kennel, and the looming shadows of the medieval city dissolve. You are back in the present. You are lying in a bed that is probably made of memory foam, not straw and flea-infested wool. The air around you is conditioned, filtered, and remarkably free of the smell of roasting ox or unwashed humanity. You are safe. But as you lay there, look at the world around you. Now that you know the bloody, paranoid history of your daily habits, the modern world looks a little different, doesn't it? It looks less like a civilized society and more like a museum of repurposed weapons and fossilized trauma. We have moved from the age of survival to the age of signaling. In the Middle Ages, as we've seen, etiquette was a shield. It was a binary system, life or death. But as history ground forward through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and into the Industrial Age, the state eventually took over the monopoly on violence. The police force was invented. The courts became functional. You no longer needed to check your neighbor for a dagger, because if he stabbed you, he'd go to jail. The immediate threat of physical violence receded from the dinner table. So what happened to the rules? They didn't disappear. They mutated. They shifted from preventing physical death to preventing social death. The aristocracy realized that since everyone was now technically safe, they needed a new way to distinguish themselves from the peasants. They couldn't just beat them up anymore, so they weaponized manners. They took the old survival protocols and made them so complex, so arbitrary, and so difficult to learn that only the leisure class could master them. Take the fork, for example. We mentioned earlier that the fork was once considered a heresy, a golden claw. By the Victorian era, the fork had not only won, it had multiplied. If you sit down at a formal dinner today, you might face 3 different forks: a salad fork, a dinner fork, and a dessert fork. Does the salad taste different if you stab it with the dinner fork? No. The physics of eating hasn't changed. But if you use the wrong fork, you signal that you don't belong. The danger isn't that you'll stab your mouth. The danger is that you'll be judged. The survival anxiety has been transferred from your jugular vein to your ego. And look at your clothes. If you are a man, or if you wear suits, you might wear a necktie. Have you ever honestly looked at a tie? It's a strip of useless silk tied in a constricting knot around your windpipe. It serves 0 functional purpose. It doesn't keep you warm. It doesn't hold your pants up. It just dangles there, a magnet for soup stains. The origin of the tie is the cravat. In the 17th century, Croatian mercenaries, hired guns, killers for hire, arrived in France. They wore knotted handkerchiefs around their necks, likely to keep their heavy armor from chafing their throats or to bind wounds. The French courtiers, who had never seen a day of combat in their lives, thought the Croat look, corrupted to cravat, was dashing. They copied it. They replaced the dirty battlefield rags with lace and silk. So when you tie a Windsor knot before a job interview, you are cosplaying as a 17th century Balkan mercenary. You are wearing a stylized piece of military kit. Some anthropologists even argue that the tie acts as a subconscious arrow, pointing directly down to the genitals, a relic of aggressive masculine display. Others say it's a symbolic noose, showing your submission to the corporate feudal lord. Either way, it's a ghost of war hanging around your neck. Historians and sociologists are still fighting over what this all means. The German sociologist Norbert Elias wrote The Civilizing Process, arguing that these manners actually rewired our brains. He claimed that over centuries, by forcing ourselves to use forks, repress our burps, and not stab our friends, we actually increased our threshold for shame and disgust. We became psychologically incapable of the casual violence of our ancestors. We didn't just hide the wolf, we killed it. But there is a counter-argument, the suppression theory. This camp argues that we are just as violent as ever, but we've pushed it into the shadows or outsourced it to the state. We are polite at dinner, but we watch movies where cities explode. We shake hands, but we destroy reputations online. The violence hasn't gone away, it's just become sublimated. We are still the same scared, aggressive primates, but now we wear napkins. Think about the personal bubble again. We talked about how medieval people had no personal space. Today, we are obsessed with it. If someone stands too close to you at an ATM, you feel a spike of adrenaline. That is the medieval weapon check reflex kicking in. Your brain is still screaming, "Oh, too close, danger," even though you know the guy just wants to withdraw $20. We are walking around with Stone Age hardware running on modern software, and the glitches are everywhere. Even our language is littered with fossilized violence. We deadline a project, originally a line around a prison. If you crossed it, you were shot. We bite the bullet, from field surgery without anesthesia. We get fired from burning down a worker's house to make them leave, or discharging a gun. The etymology is murky, but it's destructive. As you drift away from this history, take a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of your daily life. Tomorrow, when you wave to a neighbor, remember you are showing them you have no sword. When you clink a glass of beer, remember you are proving it's not poisoned. When you bless a sneezing stranger, remember you are saving their soul from a demon. You are a walking repository of ancient fears. Every polite please, every after you, every handshake is a tiny monument to the terror your ancestors felt every single day. They lived in a world of sharp edges, dark forests, and sudden death, so that you could live in a world of soft pillows and social anxiety. It's actually kind of sweet in a dark, twisted way. All these rules, all these rigid structures, they are the scar tissue of human history. They are the evidence that we tried, desperately, to figure out how to live together without killing each other. And mostly, it worked. You made it through the day. You made it to this bed. You are safe. The merchant with the dagger is dust. The king with the executioner is a footnote. The spirits in the wood have gone silent. All that's left is you, the echo of their fear, and the comfort of the present moment. Word count, 1045, wind down. Now let the heavy wooden doors of the great hall close. Hear the thud as the iron bolts slides into place, locking away the noise, the smoke, and the fear of the past. The torches on the walls flicker and die out one by one, leaving only the soft silver glow of the moon filtering through the high windows. The frantic energy of the market square has faded into a gentle hum. The mud of the streets has dried and turned to dust, blown away by the winds of time. The sharp edges of the iron weapons have rusted and returned to the earth. You are no longer a traveler in a dangerous land. You are here in your own sanctuary. The walls around you are not for defense, they are for comfort. The darkness in the room is not hiding demons, it is a blanket of rest. The silence is not a warning, it is a gift. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress, just as the history we've explored sinks into the pages of a closed book. There is no need to check the shadows. There is no need to guard your back. The cue is gone. The table is cleared. The handshake is released. Let your breathing slow down, matching the rhythm of a world at peace. Inhale the safety of the present. Exhale the tension of the past. You have survived the journey. You have learned the secrets, and now you have earned the rest. Drift past the threshold of wakefulness. Step over it gently without fear. The guardians of the night are asleep, and the only thing waiting for you in the dark